Hello, my name is Brandon Schultz, and I'm going to be talking about robots and how it affects future job opportunities. So, first, let's get started with an agenda. Alrighty, so I first want to describe the definition of a robot and what robotics is. Then, after that, we're going to get into some current examples of robots in the workforce and what will be in the workforce in the near future, some benefits and disadvantages to robotics and how robots operate, the impact on future workforce and jobs. So this can be taken a lot of different ways on how it's going to impact the future of the workforce. So I open discussion at the end, a lot around the impact on the future workforce. And then we're going to wrap it up with some ethical implications and some questions for discussion. So first, let's get started. Definition of a robot. A robot is a machine resembling a human being and able to replicate certain human movements and functions automatically. Robots use AI through machine learning but are not completely artificially intelligent. So that's a lot of words. Let's describe what that means. So AI, a robot will need artificial intelligence to operate, but it's not completely artificially intelligent because it doesn't have emotion. So if it could express how if the robot could express how it would feel, then it would basically be completely artificially intelligent. But since it can't express any of that, it has no emotion. It does have a thought process, but the thought process is really just AI and what it's been programmed to do. So, a couple of robots right now currently in the workforce today. So I actually found this slide to be very interesting when I was doing the research for the presentation. I have heard of ERD2, but I didn't actually know what ERD2 is. So when I went to look it up, I found this picture. I did the research on it, and it's really interesting. So E2DR is Honda's robot that they have created to resemble exactly what a human being does. So right there in the picture, it looks like a human being. If a human being, I guess, was made of metal. But what it's doing is it's walking up steps, grabbing a railing, all that stuff. So Honda has kept this robot very secretive, but that's to no surprise because most companies that operate with robots will keep their information or technology very secretive. They don't want others to know what they're doing with the robots, why they have the robots, all that good stuff. So we'll get in a little bit about some of that later in the presentation. But Honda has created this E2DR robot, and it's a disaster relief robot. So unfortunately, with some of the current events we've had going on, we did have that condo collapse in Florida very recently. E2DR would be the first to start breaking down some of the debris. It would be in the rescue search, looking for individuals that are missing within that disaster. So what it's able to do that a human can't, where it really differentiates between a human going through all that disaster or performing a disaster relief, trampling over debris, stepping on debris, breathing it all in. What it really does is it provides relief to the human, actually. So if a human was to go in there, a human might not be able to pick up a certain portion of weight that debris is sitting on top of someone. So I think that's an awesome creation. I think we're going to see more of the E2DR very shortly here in the future. I don't know when, but I could say probably roughly 2 years we'll see E2DR doing disaster relief functions. So the other picture I got there is the Kroger robots. So the Kroger robots, fortunately, I can't speak to this one personally. I do work for Kroger currently, and I do actually work at the site that uses these new robots. So I wanted to provide, I should say, a couple of pictures of what it looks like and maybe a video of how they operate and how they work together and how humans will work with the robots. but I'm not allowed taking any pictures. I'm not allowed taking any videos. We actually can't even have our phones around the robots. So it goes back to that, the companies keeping their technology and their information very secretive. But what I can explain, I will. So what these robots here, and I call them dishwasher looking robots, but it's very accurate if you were to describe it. It's about the size of a dishwasher, but it moves at 12 miles an hour. And it moves along this grid right here where the mouse is running over. So it travels along that grid, vertical and horizontal, and it picks up totes in between. And that grid sits about 50 feet high. So you have roughly 45 totes vertically stacked. And what it will do is it will transport all that food or all those items stored in those totes across the warehouse to different locations. And then it will drop it off at another robot. And then that robot will distribute the food or the item to a human so the human can then pick an order. Now, the robots probably would be picking orders too, but they can't really differentiate some of the items. So if you had eggs, for instance, you don't want a bunch of maybe like pots and pans that you ordered sitting on top of eggs. So you would place your eggs and your bread all separately, but the robot would only be able to recognize the shape, so it wouldn't be able to distinguish that your eggs need to go on top. One day in the future, I'm sure we can get to that point through AI, but currently it's not very feasible. So I will get into a little bit more about the Kroger robots later in the presentation. So some benefits and disadvantages. So the benefits of the robots, I have three very general benefits, but these are probably the largest component to why a company would go to robots. So first is safety. It's a win-win if people aren't getting injured, if your workplace is safer, if you don't have to fill out any recordable injuries, all that stuff. So a company would take that any day of the week, probably for as long as it exists, if the company doesn't have to worry about the safety of humans, but you also have the safety of everything else along with it, like the assets within the company, stuff like that. So I would say safety is the most outstanding reason a company would transition to robots. Consistency is going to be another big one right now, but there's a million different ways that a company could use a robot to be consistent, and it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but mainly the consistent, reliable robot would take the place of a human being that isn't so reliable or isn't so much consistent. And then if you can combine consistency and safety and you can have them operate quickly, then you have your speed there, and that's definitely three values or three components that would have a company transition to robotics or having robots do the work. So some disadvantages, I won't go into too much detail on these, but you do have an emotionless robot. So an emotional IQ is a big portion to driving business, driving sales, driving results, all that stuff. So if you don't have any emotion, it can be good and it can be bad. I guess my best example would be there'd be no one to make you laugh there at work, no one to talk to you about some of the issues going on in life, but at the same time, you wouldn't have any bad attitudes. So to me, it's a disadvantage if you can't, if you don't have any emotions to lead or maintain or manage. And then, so cost to maintain, there's a million different ways that this robot's going to cost money, but maintaining the robot is definitely going to cost the most money, and then it's actually followed by the power supply. So power supply would probably make up about 30% of the cost. for a company to operate with a robot. That's very broad numbers, though, just because you don't know what company you're working for, you don't know what industry you're in, you don't know what the robot's doing. But power supply is also an issue, because if you have a power outage, then you will have to make ends meet elsewhere. So that actually, to me, is one of the bigged issues, disadvantages to having a robot. So the future workforce, how humans and robots will work together. Humans and robots, I think, need to work together. Most individuals will say it's one or the other. The human will either do all the work, or the robot will do all the work, but that's just simply not true. I actually do work with robots now, and it's very beneficial. So I think humans and robots will be working together in the future, which leads me to the second bullet point there. 85 million jobs lost to automation by 2025. Now, that's a big number. It's a discouraging number, but it doesn't mean that it's a truthful number or an accurate number. I don't believe in that number of 85 million jobs lost. There will be jobs lost in the future to automation and robotics, but if we can find a way as leaders of a company to unite humans and robots together, then it will make for a very smooth transition to automation. So what jobs will be lost? I say, well, it depends, because it's true. It just depends. Marketing jobs are one of the least likely jobs to be taken, whereas your low-skilled, very repetitive factory work will be a job that is taken first. So some ethical implications. Roboethics, it's, believe it or not, is actually a term, and it's a dictionary term. So roboethics. How are these robots going to be designed? So robots are fallible. They do make mistakes. So are the robots going to make mistakes? What kind of mistake is it? Is it going to be an extremely costly mistake? Cybersecurity is another big issue. We talked about cyber attacks earlier in class. If these robots are getting hacked, what does that do to the operation? What does that do to information that they contain? And then you got your bias as well. So AI, believe it or not, can have bias. If the robots are in the workforce where they're reading a face and they have to or if they have to carry on a conversation based on the face they're looking at, then it could start assuming gender, it could start assuming culture, all that stuff, based on just the view of the face and some of the attributes to a human's face. Okay, so and then the intended purpose for the robots. If these robots are used to create destruction, if they're used to create harm, which they very well can be, we've heard of the term military robots, and there's actually talk right now of banning AI in the military. I don't think that's going to be a thing. I don't think it's going to happen, but they could be used for mass destruction, and it would be a very unfortunate situation if we had robots carrying on a war. So I'm going to leave you all with 4 questions. These are the 4 questions I was thinking about as I was making the presentation, going through the PowerPoint. So hope you enjoy. Thank you for listening. You have a great day.